what's your idea of joy? What are the advantages of being a joyful person? My name is Marcella, and today's theme is joy. If we search for the definition of joy, we will see that it differs from what we call happiness. Both joy and happiness are focused on the contentment and satisfaction of the human being. However, happiness tends to be more linear and steady, whereas joy is momentary, and it spikes across our lives. It is expected that humans will always be looking for contentment and satisfaction. We often hear about the pursuit of happiness, right? That means if we're still pursuing it, it may take a long time until we reach a spiritual state of constant contentment. Until we reach an awaited dream, a goal set, we keep looking for moments of joy to compensate for the journey to the finish line. But do we really need to wait that long until we're full of joy? What if I tell you that we can be happy and joyful from now on? What if being happy or joyful doesn't depend on the moment we are, but on who we are? It's because in God, joy is not a temporary state. Being happy or joyful relates to our identity. Little does it matter what moments of sadness we go through. This happiness that comes from God gives us the strength we need to go on. In the Bible, we can find a passage in Nehemiah's book, in the Old Testament, chapter 8, verse 10, that says,
"And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength."
When we open our hearts to Jesus and let Him make His home in us, allowing His guidance in our lives according to the words that He left in the Bible, then we become happy. This true contentment will come from the moment we understand who we truly are to God. From all we can say, we know we are truly loved by Him. He says that among all His creation, He considers us His firsts, even though we are not, because we are the most important to Him in His scale of creation. Did you know that everything in God is potentialized? Yes, He says in the Bible that He came to give us life, and life in abundance. He also says we are winners, but we are also more than winners. That means we will surely win when we are with Him. As the definition of joy says, it is an empowerment of happiness. Besides being happy all the time, when we are on the path of God, this happiness is even bigger. It's a joy that surpasses the joy we felt when we didn't know Him yet. And yes, we will feel sadness, but it will be temporary. It will not define who we really are. It's not part of our identity. It is why we must know who we really are and what our identity is in God. But I will leave that for another podcast, okay? According to the Bible, being happy or joyful summarizes being satisfied with bursting contentment, because the source is God. In God, there are no flaws, failures, or chasms. Even if we are faulty and flawed, what comes from God and rests in our hearts will have a perfect effect on us. It's up to us to accept it or not. And I would like for you to know that you will always be useful to someone. And that doesn't depend only on your skills. Your presence can make a huge difference in people's lives. All because you can be someone's life source of joy. There was an apostle named Paul who contributed many biblical verses. In one of the letters to the members of the Church of Corinth, we can see many examples regarding the theme we are talking about today. Shall we see? We can highlight the second letter to Corinthians, chapter 7 from verse 4 to 13 and verse 16. I will read some verses so we can have a better understanding. In verses 5, 6, and 7, the Apostle Paul says, "For even when we came into Macedonia, our bodies had to rest, but we were afflicted at every turn, fighting without and fear within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus, and not only by his coming, but also by the comfort with which he was comforted by you, as he told us of your longing your mourning, your zeal for me, so that I rejoiced still more. These verses are saying that we will become happy when we know there are people who care about us. Apostle Paul, excluding everything he went through, received some news. The Corinthians cared deeply about his life, and they passed this information on to Titus, who also rejoiced. Titus passed it on to Paul, and both were happy to know that there were people so zealous about other people's lives. Ahead in verse 13, we can read, "Therefore we are comforted, and besides our own comfort, we rejoiced still more at the joy of Titus, because his spirit has been refreshed by you all." How important it is to be joyful, because our happiness can be the reason for someone's happiness. And when the other person also opens their heart to receive the joy of God, we are contemplated with the joy we received from them. Apostle Paul also said something very important in verse 10. He said, "For godly grief produces a repentance that leads to salvation without regret, whereas worldly grief produces death." Remember when we talked about moments of sadness? Did you know that even when God tells us things that hurt or make us sad, even those have benefits? Yes, Paul says that when he corrected the Corinthians about the things they were doing wrong, they were saddened. But that was good to them. It brought life and salvation, and they regretted their sins and their mistakes. However, those who don't care about God and don't want to be on God's path will go through moments of sadness, but this sadness will lead them to perish. It's because they don't know who they truly are. They don't know their true identity in God. Lastly, I would like you to know that when we make someone happy, this person is healed from the inside, and consequently, we are healed too. All the sadness and anguish that we suffer on earth is left behind when we meet God, knowing who He is to us and knowing He really loves us. I hope you like the content of this podcast, and if you're interested in knowing more about other subjects, please stay tuned. See you soon. Bye.